to the Qataris in their capacity, because they host Hamas, of having a dialogue with Hamas about releasing the hostages. So Qatar can play several roles there, and it's played roles in the past when there have been previous contacts. It is Egypt that gets involved diplomatically to help find ways to reduce the tensions and end the conflict. But it is often Qatar that comes in through its relationship, the relationship it chooses to have with Hamas, to help put money into Gaza that will alleviate some of the social hardships, in essence, to perhaps undermine Hamas, but Hamas has access to that money, uses it for the projects that it wants. Palestinian civilians given the right to come and work inside of Israel, up to about 20,000. So Qatar's played this important role across all facets of diffusing the situation. And the hostage issue is on a very fine timeline, because Israel is getting ready for a ground incursion, which puts the hostages in a very immediate and greater jeopardy.
So complicated, so nuanced, and we're so lucky to have you here to explain, because that context is critical. Nick, you are standing there near the border with Gaza. You have been reporting on what the IDF, the Israeli military, is doing to prepare for a possible ground invasion. What are you seeing at this hour as night has now fallen there?
More artillery strikes on the northern end of Gaza, the area that the IDF has told Gaza's residents to move out of. It's not at a very high tempo right now, but it's started up. We've seen a few rockets come out of Gaza today, but not as many as before. And noticeably last night, which was the heaviest barrage of missile and artillery fire on Gaza that we've seen so far, no rockets coming out of Gaza, which I think tells its own accounting of how to stop the rockets coming out. When there's heavy fire going into Gaza, Hamas, the other groups, cannot operate and get their rockets out. But this tempo of build-up and the request to civilians to move out of the way for safety, this is all instructive about how close we may be getting to a possible ground incursion. Perhaps not tonight, perhaps not tomorrow, but I think after that, the expectations are that it becomes a very real-life possibility when Israel gets the information, intelligence, actionable, real-time, that will help it achieve its goals.
Nick Robertson, thank you so much for that fantastic reporting. And here with me to share their insights based on their years of experience, retired Air Force Intelligence Officer Colonel Cedric Leighton and former Deputy Director of National Intelligence Beth Sanner. You were sitting with me for the end of the U.S. Secretary of State and his comments. You were sort of nodding your head when you were listening to, both of you were, when you were listening to Nick explain the goal that Tony Blinken has. He has multiple goals when he is dealing with the Qataris and other stops that he's going to have along the way in the Arab world.
He certainly does, Dana. And, the key thing about this is to think of Qatar as kind of a Switzerland, or a want-to-be Switzerland in the Middle East. What they're trying to do is they're trying to bridge the gap between several different major players in the Middle East, one of them being Hamas, the other being Israel, and another one being Iran. Plus, of course, they have to deal with the Saudis, which they haven't been very successful with in the past in some instances. And they also, of course, have a major American presence in their country in the form of military bases there. So that becomes, in essence, the jumping off point for discussions on the diplomatic front. And that's why Qatar is so important to the Secretary of State on his trip right now.
And Beth, let's talk about the Israeli order to evacuate Gaza, or at least part of Gaza. My question for you is, multifold. One is the obvious: how are they supposed to do that without, let's just take one example, the UN working with Israel to allow the refugees out, to find a corridor out, Egypt, the neighbor there, allowing a corridor out, or, I don't know, some of the wealthy Arab countries, including Qatar, where the Secretary of State is right now, helping, whether it is financially or in any other way, their fellow Arabs inside inside Gaza.
I have heard this kind of horrible, cynical phrase that a lot of Middle East experts have said over many years, that the Arab states are willing to fight Israel to the last Palestinian. And it kind of tells you a lot about, kind of where we're coming from, what the history has been here. And so, on the one hand, too, you have just so much pressure from Israel saying no, that they are not going to let up this siege until the hostages are released. Then there's a complication of people moving south. Are there going to be fighters mixed in with that?
Yeah, and as you're talking, I should say that we're putting up on the screen a map that kind of gives you a sense of the other Arab countries in the neighborhood, and then of course you saw where Gaza is vis-a-vis.
Exactly. So when Blinken goes to these countries, these are exactly the things he's talking about. He's talking about, basically three things. One is, and Qatar included, very much so included, is Iran, preventing this escalation from escalating. And Qatar is one of our main conduits to Iran, just like they were with the Taliban. They hosted the Taliban negotiations for us, so they have a long role in that. But the hostages and then the refugee situation, that's going to become very important in Egypt. Very important. We give them a lot of money, Dana. So, I think that a lot of pressure has to come to bear.
Give who a lot of money?
Egypt.
Absolutely.
Qatar's under a lot of pressure right now. The emir was in Germany yesterday and talking about this LNG, liquefied natural gas deal that they are just doing, and many people in Germany are saying, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be giving that deal to them.
So this is a conversation about, multifold, but primarily is what happens to the innocent Palestinian civilians. You are both intelligence experts and have a lot of experience. What about the hostages? And do you have any hope that there is real insight into where they are inside the intelligence communities in the U.S. and in Israel?
More in Israel, perhaps because they're more tactically focused right now than in the U.S., although the U.S. can provide some data that can help with something like this. I do have some hope that some of the hostages can be freed based on historical precedent, based on the capabilities of the Israeli forces, and perhaps based on a potential success in negotiations, even a partial success. But it's a tenuous hope, and it's something that I think would take some time to realize, and I don't know how much time we really have. I think it's pretty limited.
Hamas says that 13 have already been killed in airstrikes. We don't know if that's true or not. We know that they're probably spread out in tunnels, very hard to locate. We don't have I don't think the Israelis have a complete understanding of that. There is hope that the Qataris will be able to get out women and children, maybe in exchange, but I think we also need to prepare ourselves mentally for not a good outcome with the hostages.
It's a big statement, but a realistic one, obviously. Real quick, there are massive protests around the globe today. How high is the threat level, should the threat level be right now, globally and here in the U.S.?
Well, I think one of the things we have to look for, it is a ring, right? Concentric ring. So we have schools closed down in Europe because they're worried about threats. Here in the United States, we have to worry about Jewish places of worship. But in places like Iraq and Syria in particular, where we have these proxy groups with a lot of deniability but links to Iran, I really think we are up on very high alert there.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you look at what's happening in Iraq, big protests in Baghdad. You look what's happening in Yemen, big protests in Sana'a and several other cities, and several other places in the Middle East. It's pretty clear that the fuse is about to be lit, and we have to be very, very careful with this. So if I were, working a warning system or the terrorist alert levels, I would have to say that, they definitely have to be possibly raised. It should be high at this point.
All right. Well, thank you both for that. Incredibly important to talk to both of you, given how long you both worked in intelligence. We're going to continue to cover all of the latest developments out of Israel and Gaza. Meanwhile, here in the United States, Republican chaos like we have never seen before in Congress, and that is saying something. They have no idea who the next House Speaker will be. We'll talk about that next.
This is spring semester, and Fairfields is soon unified. They switched to Google Tools for Education because there's never been a reported ransomware attack on a Chromebook. Now they're focused on learning, knowing that their data is secure.
A song by Paul Beckman, Polly Rainbow Song, also the new and first leader of humankind in the free world. Created October 13th, 2023. This song is going to be called The Alert Level is High. 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 The alert level is so high. So high, so high, so high, so high. So high, so high, so high. It's pretty high. You gotta watch that gauge. It's so hot, it could create a different page. Hey, that level, that gauge is high. The alert is high. Better keep watching it and what's happening in the world. You don't want to see it blow. Watch that gauge, the level is high. Alert, alert, it's a high alert. The alert is high. You better keep alert. It's so high, so high. Don't take your eyes off of it. Come on, steady, steady now. Come on, steady, steady now. Come on, keep calm. Don't freak out. Don't blow your top. Don't freak out. The alert level is high, so keep your calm. Keep your calm mind. When the alert level is as high as it is, you gotta keep your eyes on it, on it.
They will have at some point another election where they get behind closed doors, do a secret ballot, elect someone new, and then they still have to go to the floor. And meanwhile, they're also dealing with attendance issues now because a number of frustrated lawmakers decided to skip town and didn't want to stick around. But as of right now, Dana, no consensus, no speaker, and no ability to govern.
No, I'm going to keep it clean. Thank you so much, Melanie. I appreciate it. I actually want to go back. We're going to have a discussion about this in a minute. I want to go back to Israel. CNN's Nick Robertson is live there. Nick, what are you learning?
Well, we've just learned from the Israeli Defense Force that they have put some troops across the border into Gaza in the past 24 hours. They call it a local looking for the language here exactly, a local raid. And so a limited incursion. A local raid is a language they use to describe the troops that they've sent across into Gaza. It's not clear how many they've sent across. It's not clear yet what their mission was. It's not clear yet if their mission was successful. It's not clear yet if they had any casualties. But this is the first time since the weekend, since this big build-up of forces, that we've heard from the IDF that they have, in fact, sent troops inside the Gaza Strip. This, they say, was over the past 24 hours. The indication seems to be that this was limited, and the indication seems to be that it is over now, that those troops are out, and that would perhaps be within the sort of expected operational parameters for something like this, that the IDF would not announce something like this while they had forces over the border inside of Gaza itself.
It really is interesting that they did make this public, and you said very clearly that we don't know what the mission is right now. I mean, you would think it might be twofold. One is to try to get hostages. Another is that they located some of the terrorists or some of the higher-ranking officials in Hamas they are looking for. But what does it tell you that we know this information right now?
There's another thing to add to that mix of what it might be as well. It might be going in to recover bodies. It might be going in to recover soldiers who died over the weekend and have been on the other side of the fence. It could be as simple as that. But what it speaks to is that Israel is more and more on a footing where it can go into this very dangerous area for troops and be ready to protect itself and carry out a mission. And it's indicative that there will be more missions like this to come. I think until we get the details of precisely what it was, if it was more than just, let's say, a body recovery, then that will tell us that they're really on a forward footing at the moment.
Thank you so much for that, Nick. I want to bring back Colonel Cedric Leighton, who will hopefully continue to give us a bit of perspective on what Nick just reported. What are your thoughts?
So Dana, the key indicator here is that this was a series of small raids, and every single one of the options you talked about, possibly a hostage recovery mission, possibly the business about going after senior leadership of Hamas, and or the recovery of the remains of dead Israeli soldiers. All of those are possibilities. I am thinking it's either number one or two at this point. In essence, what they're looking for would be a perfect thing for Israeli intelligence to recover its lost luster in the wake of the debacle on the strategic front. If they have a good tactical intelligence success where their special operations forces come in and they actually have a successful mission. Of course, we don't know yet whether or not the mission has been successful. We have no idea what the actual targets were, but it seems as if this is the kind of mission where special operations forces would go in and have very finite targets that would go in, and they would be able to take actions on them and meet limited objectives in that way.
Colonel, I'm just being told in my ear that the IDF says that they were in fact searching for hostages as part of this raid. We do not know if that was successful. Again, what does that tell you as a former intelligence officer?
So the likelihood is very high that we might be disappointed with the outcome of this, Dana, because of the way in which Hamas operates. But we could see, hopefully, some success, but I don't want to give anybody any false hope at this point in time. It's very early in this. The IDF, if things are successful, at some point the IDF is clearly going to announce that they have rescued hostages, and of course that would be a big political as well as military victory for the Israelis, and it would also clear the way for further incursions from an operational standpoint on the military side, further incursions of a more conventional nature if they choose to do them into Gaza. So that, we're kind of in this environment now. So if this was a hostage rescue mission or trying to find out where the hostages are, that would be a classic special operations mission, and it would be something that would have a high payoff for the Israeli political and military leadership.
Thank you so much for jumping on and helping us make sense of this breaking news. Fascinating and important breaking news. We are now also getting information from the White House that the president was just on a call with the families of missing Americans presumably held by Hamas terrorists. I want to talk about this and more with our panel, CNN's Audie Cornish, PBS NewsHour White House correspondent Laura Barron-Lopez, and Amy Walter, the publisher and editor-in-chief of the Cook Political Report. Let's just stay on President Biden and the way that he and his administration have been handling what's going on there, and just what we just heard from the White House minutes ago, which is that the president is talking to families of Americans presumed, we don't know for sure, but presumed to be held hostage by Hamas.
I mean, I think the president is doing what he's supposed to in this moment, right? As opposed to what we are seeing in the House and with House Republicans. I think that there is nothing more to be done than to be very, very direct and clear about what your position is. And he has done that through his speeches and actions. And the truth is, on the other side of the ledger, so to speak, the alleged frontrunner for Republicans is not having any kind of conversation like that. It has not been able to articulate in any way where he stands, what he thinks should be done. And so, for all the people who have been concerned about Joe Biden as a president, we are going to have a lot of performance here to judge going forward.
I should add, Laura, that we are told that there were 14 families who were represented on this call. The call lasted for over an hour. And it included not just President Biden, but also his National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, and Roger Carstens, who is his ambassador, a Trump holdover, I should note, and his ambassador who helps negotiate the release of hostages globally.
Yeah, I think that right now in this moment, I was just talking to a source earlier this morning who's close to President Biden, who's known him for a very long time, and who said that in this moment, President Biden is pretty comfortable, that this is his experience, whether it be in the Senate or as vice president, he has, right, and he has been in these positions for a very long time, has a relationship going back to the 80s with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and that on foreign policy, he's incredibly comfortable. And this is something that we're seeing right now in real time, that he came out and made a very forceful and direct speech, as Audie said, and has stuck to essentially what he believes in terms of his forceful support of Israel, but also trying to explicitly state that his administration, one of their main priorities, is to keep this as confined as possible and to make sure that it doesn't expand.
That's a great point. And then we move to the next question, which is the president. I think I agree with both of you. This is a stage on which he is incredibly comfortable. For many Americans, this is something they will be watching, but ultimately, we judge our presidents, at least politically and on election time, on domestic agenda, much more than foreign policy agenda. And so I think that is when we talk about what the sort of split screen right now between a Republican House dysfunction and a president who's, again, on territory where he feels really comfortable, where he's commanding the world stage literally, is politically very appealing for Democrats and for Biden. As we go forward, I think, as we get into a political season, the split screen may not be quite as clear.
I've thought a lot about this. Same thing, right? Foreign issues or international issues tend to fade even when the images are striking. We saw this with Ukraine. I do feel like there's something different about the Middle East and the question of conflict between Israel and Palestinians, or in this case, Hamas, right, a terrorist group. One is that it doesn't go away quickly, right? It doesn't sort of fade. It can go for a long time. I don't think it's an accident that we heard from the voice of George Bush in just the last day or two in a speech of where he was weighing in on, well, the hard part comes when people realize how long it goes, when the wariness kicks in, and that will be hard for the president. And I do think there's always been something very particular about this part of the world that it just makes it hard to look away, and it makes it hard to say, even as an American, well, this somehow doesn't matter to our national politics. That's just hasn't really been how it's played out.
And Republicans in the Republican Party have often, especially in recent years, been very proud of their support of Israel, and we saw that they're in turmoil right now, not just with the House speakership, but also with their ability to show any type of support for Israel, because the leader of their party, as you pointed out, praised Hezbollah and also attacked Benjamin Netanyahu in a political speech. He said this is Donald Trump we're talking about, has been very hurt very badly because of what happened here. He was not prepared, and Israel was not prepared. That's true, but is that really something that Republicans who are
I just say this because Israel is preparing for, obviously, a conflict of a scale of which we have not seen.
And there was a ton of
something that fades in a month or two.
A ton of backlash even from his opponents, who typically are not willing to push back. Though, as we get to this next phase, we may also, we're likely to have division within the Democratic side, especially if what we are poised to see is incredible death and destruction and horror in Gaza. And so
it's just barely under the surface right now.
That's right, exactly.
Guys, thank you. We're going to have to take a quick break. We're going to go back to Israel. Stay with us.
I was stuck. Unresolved depression symptoms were in my way. I needed more from my antidepressant. Vraylar helped give it a lift.
Adding Vraylar to an antidepressant is clinically proven to help relieve overall depression symptoms better than an antidepressant.
President Biden is doing fantastic on the world stage. Now, if the world could only hear my song. To free the hostages. A song by Paul Beckman, Paul Rainbow Song, created October 13th, 2023. Also the new and first leader of humankind in the free world. President Biden is doing terrific on the world stage. He's acting like a real president. President Biden's doing terrific on the world stage. The world stage, he's our president. Kudos to you, Mr. President. You're being exactly what we need, as opposed to what you saw Donald Trump do. Now, if the world could only hear my song, a song I made that can free the hostages, yeah. Now if the world can only hear my song, a song I made that can free the hostages. Everyone made me think you need missiles and bombs, guns and ammunition. Go in, go in, go in. But I've got an alternative. An alternative. Utilizing something we call capitalism. It's an alternative. Let my song get heard by the Palestinians, by the people, and I'll bet you'll get your hostages in no time at all. For an explanation of my mainstream name, Paul Beckman, my new age name, Palu Rainbow Song, and when I utter and say, also by the new and first leader of humankind in the free world, please go to Internet Solutions and Songs 24-7 at Palu Rainbow Song Bio on YouTube, and look for a playlist called Movie Song Reviews by Palu. There, look for some special videos that should be the first ones you see that come under the category of a special note. There'll be some videos and song videos. They'll all give an adequate explanation of all that plus more. Thank you very much. Namaste. I honor the divine in all.